Hey, dotFIT fam, happy Friday. It is currently, what's the captain's log, Neil?
Captain's log, star date, April 20, help me out with that one.
4th.
24th, 2020, day 39, global lockdown.
We are so happy you're here. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Kat Bearfield, VP of Nutrition Services here at dotFIT. I'm also a registered dietitian. And of course, we have founder and CEO, the fearless leader, Neil Spruce. We're so excited to be talking to you. We're like craving human interaction. I know it's a screen, but I'm so glad you are here because we're addressing one of the coolest topics Neil and I both talk about every day, Neil, right?
No, not just that. I mean, we get 100 questions a day about these topics, and they're always, at the top of mind of everybody. So it's nice to be able to put it all together. And on that note, I should tell you that this is getting very close to being maybe the highest attended one. Because I'm watching you come on right now. There's literally 5 people coming on per second. I'm watching the number click up, click up, click up. It's crazy. And we're at a crazy number already. Now, I always thought the muscle gains one we did was going to be the biggest, so we'll see if this one outpaces it. It's getting close there. So
Okay.
which is good. Which means one of 2 things. One, you got nothing else to do. Or 2, you're very interested. That's the other part. And I'm sure you are. I'm sure it's a combination of the 2. Why wouldn't you be interested? Yeah. And number else, you got lockdown. You might as well learn something new. What's
Absolutely.
my first rule? My first E? Learn something new every day and apply it to your field. So you'll be able to do that. So on that note, let me just kind of kick this off a little bit, and I'm going to turn over to Kat. Usually she kicks it off, and then she turns it over to me, and we just work together and put it together and deliver everything. So you guys all know Kat, right? She's our executive vice president of nutritional services here, and of course our senior dietitian for everything that we do out here when it comes to on the education side for any of the type of programming and everything else that we put together. So I asked her to really work on the myth thing a little bit here, so we get that perspective from the scientific community and of course me too. I've contributed obviously to this, and you've heard many of these things for a long time in all of our presentations. We cover a little bit here and a little bit there, but this was something we were just going to put it all together kind of in one little place so you guys could all gather and listen to some of these things, but most importantly ask questions at the end. So Kat's going to lead this thing. We try to capture a lot of the myths that are out there, especially the current ones out here. So those are the ones that you're going to see today. And then there'll be a whole bunch of other ones you can ask later on. And if we're have enough information to answer it with an intelligent answer, we will. Because some of these myths that pop up are some things we haven't heard of yet, but they're getting close to being popular. But I think these are the most popular that you're going to find today. So I'm going to turn it over to Kat right now, and she'll get this thing started for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. So a couple housekeeping notes. You guys are in listen-only mode. Those of you who are back, you know this, right? We capture a recording, which we'll post in a few days. And at the end, like Neil said, you're going to use the chat box to put in your questions, and we'll field we have nothing else to do. We might as well hang out with you guys. We'll hang out together and answer and bust more myths if you want to. So at any point in time during the presentation, you can open up the chat box in the go-to webinar panel and just type in your question, and we will be happy to field all of those at the end. So we had our marketing team figure out what people are searching for on the internet, and we came up with the 10 most searched for questions related to fitness, nutrition, and exercise. So I had a lot of fun. Neil does this every day, busting myths, taking in questions from all you guys when you send them in. And I had a lot of fun digging into some of the research. So let's get started. Let's see if this will work for me. This is always like the test, right? Will the presentation advance? And I guess not.
You got it? Just click on the.
Okay, here we go.
Perfect. There we go.
So we're going to provide evidence. I'm talking about evidence in a second related to some of the most current controversial topics in our industry, in our field, in fitness. And so here they are here. You can see this is a list of the 10, and hopefully some of these pique your interest, all right? Because once again, our marketing team figured out who's searching for what. All right, so I wanted to start off with talking about how you go about determining, how we go about as a fitness research and development company, determining the quality of information and how we come up with our guidelines, whether that's in our program, whether that's in our the products that we make, or any information that we give to you guys. And so there is what's called this hierarchy of evidence that was really started in the field of medicine, and it was really designed to help medical professionals determine what information is credible, right? So you can see here, there's this pyramid. You start at the bottom, and the way it works is the quality of information increases as you go up the levels in the pyramid. So what do you notice, right? Down below is background information, quote unquote, expert opinion, etc. And then you move up to case controlled and cohort studies, which are considered observational research. And you may or may not know this, but observational research doesn't establish cause and effect. It establishes relationships between one or two variables in general. So there's no cause, but that's where you're going to see most of the news headlines is through observational research. And then the highest quality evidence is going to come from systematic reviews and meta-analyses. And one of the databases that we're in multiple times per day is PubMed, and we go in there to look up all these different levels of evidence. We typically start with a meta-analysis or systematic review because those will synthesize various studies in one particular topic, and then you'll have experts weigh in and peer review that to make sure that there's a consensus around that topic. Okay, so if you take a look, if we look at the grid or 7 levels of evidence, you can see level 7 or the base. These are ideas, opinions, editorials, or anecdotes. So Neil, that would be like maybe social media, right? Typically.
Right. Yeah. Or Google. Whoever paid Google the most to get to the top, you know, yeah, so it'd be like that.
So Google ads, and then once again, you go up, it goes up in level of quality with observational. So you can see this is slightly more reliable, becoming more reliable. You get to what's called randomized controlled trials, RCTs, and you probably recognize that acronym because we use it all the time. We'll talk about RCTs and what do the RTCs show, and you can see they're very reliable. They're typically highly controlled. That's why it's called an RCT. It's considered the gold standard. And then as you go up, like I said, you know, systematic reviews and meta-analysis is the most reliable of all if you can get a systematic review, if there's enough research or trials in that area, right?
Yeah, for sure. And because what they do is they actually look at RCTs, they throw out the bad ones, they bring in the good ones. And that's what these end up getting published as. And that's what we look at for almost everything at the end of the day. But there are things that you can't do you know, RCTs on, right? And I talk about that all the time. How do you do a randomized controlled trial on someone from womb to tomb using a complete multivitamin mineral versus someone that doesn't? Number one, it would be unethical to tell someone not to, right? For all the things that you could be missing in your diet. So there are exceptions to that to a certain extent where logic plays in. It's like, I don't need an RCT to tell me that house is on fire. I need water to put it out. Okay, so there are exceptions. There's logic that exists as well, that you don't need an RCT. We have enough information to figure that out on our own or whatever. But when it comes to what you're going to see here with the myths and what Kat has put together for all of us here is we are basing it on facts, that evidence-based facts, and that's what, you know, the collection of studies.
Yeah, and you want to be, as a consumer, as a fitness professional, you want to be aware and dig in where are your resources coming from. And what you're going to find in the news a lot is, right, Neil, the observational studies, that's what the news picks up on, and they come up with some headline that typically will distort.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, and news, one thing we should all know about news, or I should remind you about news, the news is generally bad because that's what gets your attention. Good news is expected. So it's not going to get your attention. It's not going to keep you on the channel watching it. But bad news will, because that's not expected. So I just keep that in mind.
Yes, very, very good point. Okay, so you're going to see throughout this myth busting session that we're going to be referring to these types of studies, and so you'll understand what we're talking about if you're new to this area of sort of the evidence-based methodology. Okay, so what do we got next? So ketogenic, let's start with there, Neil. We get a ton of questions on types of diets, which diet is the best. Certainly the keto diet is one of the most popular. Let's define it first. What is it? It's a diet that has, like you can see by the little graphic here, very little carbohydrates. You can actually limit it to 50 grams per day. And then how do you know if you're in ketosis? Well, you have ketone bodies present in the blood, and there's different things on the market that purportedly measure that. So what does the science show? It will reduce appetite. It has an appetite suppressing effect. So people like the fact that they don't feel hungry. What the short-term weight loss studies show is that you're going to lose more weight than someone on a higher carbohydrate diet. And one of the reasons why is because carbohydrates, and glycogen is the stored form of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates holds water. For every gram, every 1 part of carbohydrate, you get 3 parts water. And so if you cut carbohydrates, then you're losing a lot of that, what's called water weight. And that's why the short-term studies will show better results. If you look at the long-term trials, it's essentially a wash. They get similar results, assuming that calories and protein are matched. And so you have to be careful when you're doing comparison studies, because if calories and protein are matched, well, then you have a confounding variable that doesn't make it apples to apples. It's more like apples to oranges, if you will. And so what we've tried to educate people on is that all diets work the same way, essentially. And that is by cutting calories, whether it's cutting carbs, right, in keto, whether it's cutting everything except for meat in carnivore, which tends to be on the rise right now, whether it's cutting dairy, grains, legumes, and from like in the paleo diet, or you cut the time that you can eat. Everything reduces something in one of these diets so that you are in a calorie deficit, right? And that is going to force weight loss, because that's the one thing required for weight loss to occur, and that is a calorie deficit. So how do you know what diet is best for you? It's adherence. It's whether or not you can stick to that particular eating style. That's going to determine if it's best for you. But there is no one best weight loss diet. And we did an extensive research look on low carb diets. One of the best trials, highest quality randomized controlled trial, it's called the dotFIT study. It's an acronym for diet intervention examining the factors interacting treatment success. It was published in JAMA a few years ago. And what it was comparing low fat diet to low carb, low carb diet to high carb, or low fat to low carb. So same thing. It was a year-long, 600 subjects, which is really great, because the more people you have in the study, then it's easier to find an effect, right? It's more reliable. They track the diet compliance closely, and essentially weight loss was similar. If you look at the graph, if you pull up the study and look at the graph, it's striking how similar the weight loss was. And insulin didn't really have an impact on whether or not someone changed body composition and or weight. So if you want more on this topic, we did a masterclass on popular diets. It's on our website, right? That's what it looks like, dotfit.com/dotFIT tools masterclass. And I dig into the individual studies on the keto diet. So Neil, you have any commentary on diets in general?
Yeah, I mean,
or the keto?
Yeah, the most recent study that just came out, Kat, as you know, I think last month, compared 6 different diets, including the Mediterranean diet, the normal calorie restrictive diet, DASH diet, keto diet, paleo diet, intermittent fasting. And at the end of 52 weeks, they all came out the same, basically, when it came to health parameters, so the health markers and weight loss. And all weight loss was 100% on all of the 6 diets compared. All of them were based on the calorie deficit. So at the end of the day, just like you said, it's what you can stick with. And of course, keto diets is something most people can't stick with. It had the highest drop-off rate, people that fell out, because it's something very difficult. It's a good way to get started for some people. So for a lot of you back in my day when I was a competitive bodybuilder, 70s, 80s, and very, very early 90s before I retired, in the 60s and 70s, keto diets were what we did. We actually invented it for everybody, other than clinical reasons, for epilepsy. And we used it, and we used keto sticks and everything else. We graduated past that. We were always ahead of the public when it came to dieting, to get your body fat down and support lean body mass. So keto, it's just something that resurfaces on a regular basis. And sometimes it's easier for people to stick with that than it is to do something else, the high fat, but we had a higher protein than that. When I say 20% of calories, we ate so much food that it didn't matter, how much, you were getting plenty of protein at that point. You're getting a gram per pound. So anyway, it comes down to that. It really is. We kind of quit arguing about diets these days. They all come out the same when it comes to a deficit. Just make sure you get all the nutrients you need. If you're eating a diet that removes food groups, that's bad things, right? Like paleos or even keto removes food groups. So that's why Kat built this grid for all of our practitioners to be able to have, because you can recommend these things to make sure that they fill in all their nutrient gaps. Okay.
Okay, and this is also available on the website under dotFIT tools. You can see the summary of the diet, which nutrients tend to be missing, and of course the recommended supplements. And by the way, Neil, most people are missing nutrients even if they're not dieting, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'd be about 100% of everybody, no matter what. You don't just accidentally get all the RDAs of every vitamin and mineral that you need in the body, from food alone. So it's just, that everybody is. And then when you add the diet to it, it gets worse.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about high fructose corn syrup. Believe it or not, Neil and I thought maybe this one died a little bit, but surprisingly, people still want to know if high fructose corn syrup is worse than sugar, or if it's bad for you, or if it causes all these different things. So let's just take a look at what they actually are. So high fructose corn syrup is a disaccharide. That means 2 sugar molecules, and it contains both glucose and fructose, right? Single sugars. So when you look at the composition of high fructose corn syrup, of course, it's manufactured from corn. It's 42 to 55% fructose, and then the rest of it is glucose, right? And the higher fructose, the reason why they make it is because it's sweeter and it makes food taste better. So when you look at, well, what's sucrose, what's table sugar? Well, you can see that it also contains both sugars, both glucose and fructose, except that it's 50% fructose. So essentially, high fructose corn syrup isn't that much higher than regular table sugar, right? There's essentially very little difference. So for example, right, if you have 100 grams of high fructose corn syrup, see I'm using an acronym there, that would equal 400 calories, because there's 4 calories per gram, right, of sugar or carb. And that would make 55 grams of fructose versus 50 grams of fructose in table sugar. So what's the difference here? We're looking at, maybe a 5-gram difference that equates to 20 calories if you're looking at using high fructose corn syrup versus sugar, table sugar. What does the research say about high fructose corn syrup, weight loss, and health? Well, if you look at an RCT, randomized controlled trial, double blind, a lot of subjects that were overweight and obese, what they did was they randomized them into 4 different groups. So you can also see that they maintained a calorie deficit, right, for weight loss, and you got about half your stuff from, sorry, did that just change for you guys? Did the view just change?
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Okay, hold on. My bad, 1 second. 1 second. Okay, are we back?
Perfect, yep, you got it.
Okay, awesome. So you can see here 4 groups. They're in a calorie deficit, moderate amount of protein, some fat. Group 1 got a low high fructose corn syrup. Group 2 got higher, 20% of calories. And then the groups 3 and 4 got regular sugar, right? 10% came from sucrose, table sugar, and then the other group had 20%. And guess what happened? They all lost weight with no significant differences between. So same theme as the different diets, right? When there's a calorie deficit and it's similar, maintained regardless of the composition of sugar, in this case, there is no difference in weight loss. And by the way, they also reduced cholesterol significantly. So that's one of the randomized controlled trials. And if you look at additional research in this area, you'll see that there's no differences between high fructose and corn syrup and sugar in regards to all these health markers or metabolic outcomes, if you will, including appetite and calories consumed at the next meal. So what did this systematic review conclude? And of course, we included all these citations on the slide so that you guys can go in and look for yourself. Actually take a look at this study. The review concluded that you only had an adverse effect on blood lipids, on blood fats, right? When though that fructose added calories to your diet. So if you're consuming extra fructose or high fructose or sugar for that matter, and that equates to you consuming more, yeah, you're going to have some problems. But that doesn't happen just with high fructose, right, Neil? It happens across the board regardless.
Exactly. So in other words, to summarize that, if you're in the process of gaining weight, you don't want high fructose corn syrup, okay? and by the way, we don't use it in anything that we make. And one of the main reasons we don't, there's no reason not to, if you're on a weight maintenance, a health program, if you use a little bit of it, it's like anything else, right? Too much of anything's bad for you, but there's nothing wrong with it compared to just a regular natural sugar. So it somewhat is, obviously, is because it's just got a bad name out there. So we just keep it off there to make it easier for all you fitness professionals to be able to say, not have to have that argument with them. But these are the facts. That's all. We don't deal with anything except the facts. And
okay, so key takeaways, right? High fructose corn syrup and table sugar are essentially the same. Excess consumption of either one, you're going to have problems. I'm sorry, I don't know why. I keep trying to make this window go away, and it just
came back. That's right. Just pop it up. Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Okay, so we have excess consumption of either one can have negative effects, and they don't prevent weight loss if you're in a calorie deficit. You saw from that study and the systematic review.
Right. So it's calories.
Right. So it's total calories, right? We always say calories are king. That still holds true. And this debunks the whole sugar. You know, we hear out there, you know, sugar, you can't have sugar. Sugar makes you fat. Sugar is fattening. All these different things. So let's roll into the next one. Do you need to avoid sugar to lose weight? Let's take a look at what the research shows. So here's a randomized controlled trial in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. This is one of the early ones that really took a look at sugar and its impact in obese women, right? Their average age was 40. They were on a low calorie diet for 6 weeks, eating mostly carbs, 20% protein, and some fat. And what do we find here? Well, guess what happened? All meals were provided, so there was no, cheating, if you will. And then the first group got 43% of their calories from sugar, so that's a ton, right? That's a ton. And the second group was considered the low sugar diet. They only got 4% of the calories from sucrose, from table sugar. So here are the results. And I just wanted to show you this sample menu so that you could see exactly, what they were eating. So if you just take a second to look, what were they actually eating? This is the high sugar diet, right? Kool-Aid, sweet tea powder, marshmallows. You can see, cookies, all those things as compared to the lower. So they had to do that because 43% of their diet had to come from sugar. And once again, they're consuming 1,100 calorie diet. So they're in a calorie deficit. This is the low sugar diet. And you can see there's even aspartame in there, which we'll get to in a second. And so what were the results? Well, here's the graph on body weight changes over time over that 6-week period. What do you notice for the two groups, the high sugar and low sugar? Over time, what happened? Both groups lost similar amounts of weight with no significant differences between the two, right? They both experience lower blood lipids, blood fats, so your cholesterol, triglycerides, and lower blood pressure. And they also, interestingly enough, which is actually not really interesting because, when you lose weight, you feel better. You got decreases in depression and negative mood. So what's the key takeaway here? Sugar, even at 43%, does not prevent weight loss during a calorie deficit. Once again, what are we saying, Neil? Or what does the research show?
Well, at the end of the day, let's face it, weight loss itself, when it comes to health, will trump the method. So if there is sugar in your caloric allotment and you're losing weight, your metabolic parameters are going to be equal to almost anything. So we're not talking about a sugar diet here. We're talking about the fact that there's nothing wrong with sugar in a caloric deficit as long as it's not taking the place of other nutrition. That's all we're saying. Sugar's in everything. A baked potato is sugar, right? It's just glucose polymer. It's glucose just all strung together. That's why it's not sweet when you taste it like it is a piece of candy, because that's all broken up. So just keep that in mind. We're not promoting sugar. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because added sugars are a serious problem, right? Because that gets people addicted to them. So what we're talking about is just, sugar itself isn't the cause of weight gain, and weight loss will trump the method regardless of the nutrients coming in.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fearful thinking out there, right? In the industry, like people are so afraid. They label and they see 10 grams of sugar. Well, that's 40 calories. You can see in this trial, these women consume 43% of their calories from sugar. So to Neil's point, the method is going to get you results, and there's no real need to fear sugar itself, although we do advocate healthy eating, of course. Okay, so alkaline water. This one is funny to me, Neil.
So I don't even know how that one ever got started in the first place, but I get it.
So I've never bought alkaline water, but when I looked it up, it's more expensive, right, than regular water. And the marketing will have you believe that there's all these health benefits to it. And so if you take a look at the actual way the body works, the human body regulates your pH super tightly. It likes to be in homeostasis. So between 7.35 and 7.45 is where your pH basically is maintained. And there's all these different systems in the body to make sure you stay within that range. A lot of the enzymes, in your body need to have that pH in order to be activated, deactivated, etc. Now, if your pH falls outside of this, well, this happens with poisoning, ketoacidosis, with diabetes, and with liver failure. As you can see, bad things happen when you fall out of your normal pH levels. So what do we know about alkaline water? Well, we know that if you look at the scale here on pH, lower on the pH scale, gastric acid, that's stomach acid, and then the higher you go, obviously around 7 is neutral, and then alkaline is up. So alkaline water is typically marketed around pH of 8 to 9. And what does the science show? Basically, there's no science. So there's no research on any of these claims. And these are pretty, bold claims, if you will. It's anti-aging, it supports the immune system, it boosts weight loss, it's detoxifying, it prevents cancer. And I think that's it. And so essentially, there's no research, Neil. So
I mean, it's comical. Obviously everything you eat is acidic or alkaline. Anything you drink can be acidic or alkaline, but your body immediately converts it to what it needs to do, and it keeps you in that very tight range, or you're dead. So
or you're dead.
This isn't going to help anybody. It doesn't make any sense.
So there you have it. Okay, so let's move on. Artificial sweeteners. Okay, so I know that there's a lot of sensitivity around this topic. So once again, we're coming from the standpoint of, what's the evidence show? And so what do we know? That there are several sweeteners on the market, low calorie, no calorie sweeteners, artificial, however you want to slice it and dice it. But essentially, they've been researched extensively and approved for use, not just here, but also in the European Union and in Canada, where they're a lot more conservative, right, Neil? There's 7 of them.
Yeah, there's 7 non-nutritive sweeteners that are the most studied ingredients maybe on the planet.
So What are the pros to them? Well, the reason why they're used is because they're way sweeter, 200 to 600 times sweeter than sugar with 0 calories. And so what do we know, what the body of evidence shows? What does the body of evidence show in high quality trials about no calorie sweeteners? That replacing refined sugar, added sugars, right, with artificial have been shown to reduce calories and support weight management goals. It's actually an evidence-based strategy used by nutrition professionals. So that's what the body of evidence shows. So let's just get into it just a little bit more, right? So aspartame, I know there's a lot on the slide, so stick with me here. Equal, right? Equal NutraSweet sugar twin. It's made from amino acids, aspartic acid and phenylalanine. A lot of people will say, well, it's toxic because it produces methanol. Well, yeah, it does. Methanol is produced in small quantities, very, 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 very small. It's only toxic in large quantities. You may or may not have heard this. It's not the chemical, it's not the compound that makes something toxic, it's the dose. The dose makes the poison. So negligible amounts of methanol is produced. We also know that methanol is produced by it, and it's actually naturally occurring in fruit juice, and some veggies, and fermented foods. 600 studies, you guys. It actually gets kind of a bad name, right, Neil? But it gets a really bad name. 90 countries, and where the controversy comes from down here is these rat studies that basically showed that if you gave megadoses to the rat studies, and I think these were done in the 70s, it caused cancer. And the news picked that up as a headline and splashed it everywhere. And that's where most of the controversy comes from.
And no human being in the world could eat the doses that were fed to these rats. Not to mention the rats were bred to have cancer in the first place, so
Yes.
It's like this is all a sugar industry conspiracy. And I'm not a conspiracy guy at all, but that's how this stuff pops up. It's like comical. We don't use aspartame. I want to make everybody clear there. One of the reasons we don't use aspartame is because people go to Google and they go to the internet and they read this stuff. So we just let's avoid that conversation altogether. Even though we're telling you there's nothing wrong with it when you use it in the normal amounts any human being would use it. Okay.
So with that said, right, there's something called the acceptable, here in bold, the daily intake, which is set by all these different organizations that's listed here. And it's set at 22.7 milligrams per kilogram of your body weight. I'll talk about acceptable daily intake in a second so that you understand what it is. But essentially that equates to, it's a safe amount, shown to have no adverse side effects. And that means you can have 18 diet sodas a day. We're not advocating that, by the way. We're just saying that's what it equates to, or 75 packets for a 132-pound person. Now, there's a percentage, a very small percentage of the population that has a disease, a rare disease called PKU, where you can't break it down, can't break down phenylalanine, and you don't want to consume aspartame. So any parting words on aspartame, Neil? Can we move on to the next one, Sakharin?
That's it. I just want you to know that I can kill anybody with too much of anything. So just, I mean, it's a little bit comical, in the way that this stuff goes. But hey, it's just kind of the world we live in.
Exactly. Okay, so the next one here, Sakharin, right? So we got sweet and low, sweet tab, and others. So once again, going back to where does the controversy come from? You're looking at these animal studies, mostly in rats. They say glucose metabolism, right? These are the people that say it's gonna, mess with your insulin levels, et cetera. Now, in humans, one human study, right, that were given high dosages, what they did was they transferred the feces, right, to rats, and from humans to rats, and it showed that it lowered glucose tolerance. Okay, so what does that prove? Nothing. It proves nothing. So, but I wanted you guys to see that's where some of this information comes from. And so that dose equivalent is 10 packets, and you can see the acceptable daily intake is lower than actually aspartame. Okay, so let's move on to, this is stevia, right? It's produced, it's produced from stevia leaves, so it's a natural sweetener, if you will. But that doesn't mean it's not processed or refined, because it does require some processing, right? Truvia is the most highly processed. Green leaf stevia is the least processed. But once again, it's been studied, it's been approved, and the acceptable daily intake is set at 1.8 mg per pound. You actually see a little bit more problems with stevia, with allergic reactions, etc., in the research than you do with the others. And I think Neil's got some stuff to share on that in a sec. And then finally, sucralose, which is Splenda. What do we got from that? Well, we know that when you look at, how it's broken down, well, most of it's not absorbed. It's excreted intact. Some pass through the GI tract, again, eliminated, passes through the kidneys, eliminated through the urine. Well, has it been studied? Where's the controversy come from? In rats. In rats, given high dosages, you got some changes in gut bacteria. So you might see headlines, it messes with your gut bacteria. There's no studies in humans yet that have proven that it messes up our gut bacteria. But that's where the controversy comes from. And you have to consume a lot, 23 packets a day, to exceed or meet, I should say, the acceptable daily intake level for Splenda. Okay, so that moves us into the next one. Natural is better. So Neil, this is, you've done a lot of this, studying on this topic. So could you talk about it, please?
Yeah, it's a big one. So first of all, you should know that we don't use the saccharins or the aspartames and all that, and that's just to avoid controversies. You don't need to. We do use stevia in our natural products, and we use it, in the, of course, the two other protein powders, and we use it in some of the bars and so forth. So we have that, which is the natural, because it's still labeled natural, and whatever natural is, everything's processed at some point, right? So I always make that joke too when people, say that. But here's when you look at artificial sweeteners, and I'm just trying to, by the way, let me clarify this first. I start any of these lectures out with this. Every single person is entitled to their own opinion, and no one respects that more than I do, okay? But no one is entitled to their own facts. So you can't take your opinion and pretend like you're an expert and tell somebody. You better have facts, and you better have evidence to back that up. And that's the difference. And so you guys are all fitness professionals. You're all practitioners. You've all gone through all school and all those things, and we're making sure that you can relay the facts. I'm not trying to undo a mother bear from her cub. If you believe that this stuff is bad, I'm not trying to undo that. We make products that have, it's completely all natural, but there is something that you should know as a practitioner, and there's something that you should know as a human being, is that if you're not qualified to have that conversation, say, oh, you can't have a Diet Coke. How many times I hear that? You can't have a Diet Coke because it'll kill you. Really? Okay, I mean, it's like you are not qualified to have that conversation. You've already proved to me that you know nothing when you've said that. So you got to be very careful about how you do that. That's why we're talking to practitioners right now, and I'll make sure you have the right information. That doesn't mean I want anybody to have a Diet Coke. I'm just giving you the facts. So you can't pass on something that is opinion. You can only pass on the facts. You can have your own opinion and do what you want to do. I want to start that all out there. Okay, so here. So there are common myths. Natural is better, right? Well, let's start with them. The artificial sweeteners cause cancer, and we already went through this whole thing. But the bottom line is the actual, and there's your bullets, they don't. But natural sweeteners, they replace might. And I've got it all referenced up here, okay? All right? So they're replacing things that actually might cause cancer that are natural sweeteners. It's just from high intake of sugar that people get addicted to. You don't get addicted to artificial sweeteners. It's impossible. Natural doesn't always mean healthy or safe. I want to remind everybody of this. Natural food allergies kill, sicken, and added natural sugar can cause obesity. Well, guess what? Artificial sweeteners, non-nutritional sweeteners, none of the above. Look at the warning on there, allergen warnings. They're on food labels, they're on things we make because our manufacturers makes things that might have peanuts in it. We don't have it in all, but I'm just saying it might make it. People die from these things. That's why they're listed on labels. 15 states in the United States are trying to get this printed on every label right now. Natural sugar, drinking beverages with added sugars, natural added sugars, of course, contributes to obesity, diabetes, and tooth decay. Well, there's the one on the Diet Coke side, 0. It doesn't contribute to any of that. Just giving you an idea, you guys, this weird sort of mentality that people get, they get locked into this. That allows conspiracy theories to get out there. So the bottom line, these are all the references down below. I mean, natural ingredients, when you look at reports on these things and adverse events reports, anywhere from hives to itching. Some people eat fruits and their throat begins to swell up from the fruit because they're allergic to it. Pollen. You walk outside today, we're allergic to it. And it goes for anywhere from just the itching stuff all the way to death, all right, or anaphylactic shock, as we call it. So again, that's natural for you. So not everything natural doesn't mean it's better. Just keep that in mind. That's the most important part I wanted you to get from this piece right here. Now, the next one. This is a common question that we get, and I'm sure you get it too in your FAQ. Why do we use artificial sweeteners? Okay, well, I'm going to say it one more time. You don't have to have that argument because we have the natural ones and the other two products here, and we have unflavored chocolate, vanilla, all natural way smooth, and best plan. So you got that. But like I said, make sure you have the facts. The answer is, without a doubt, for the general population, it is better and healthier than sugar. And I just showed you why in the previous slide. And they are all FDA, they're FDA approved. And of all of them, sucralose comes out number 1. And that was just brand new recent study, that reference little blue thing. You can click on that and find that right now. Tested best of all the 7 sweeteners, including in weight management, okay, which was huge. So, and it allows less calories, more nutrition. That's what the whole goal is, right? And it supports blood sugar levels. It's approved for diabetics. It's so safe that it's approved for children, okay? And all the way around, and here's all the newest stuff that's on that. You know, so again, you couldn't get enough of it to cause a problem, even though you can get enough of anything, obviously. And I'm not, and the amount that are in our products are so minute, they're not even listed in a milligram on a label because they are so minute. And they are inert, as Kat already said, they just go right through you. So again, that is, all of these studies are the newest there. In fact, in Europe, it is so safe, they approved it in infant formulas. Because what happens, we've learned that sugar, natural sugar, constantly, and adding it to things that are not natural, like natural sugar in fruit, fructose and glucose that comes in fruit, brings a whole bunch of good things with it. So that's good. But when you start adding sugar to fruit juices, adding it, right, that gets children addicted to it. You add it to sodas, that gets people addicted to it because humans are addicted to the taste of sweetness. So that's what we're not trying to do. So that keeps it going, and then it adds the calories. You're getting 200 calories when you could get 0. That doesn't make any sense in the big picture. So they've approved it for children, infant formulas, because it's that safe. You don't do that if it's not safe. So I just wanted you as fitness professionals, as practitioners, to understand that. So you can have at least an intelligent conversation with someone, but like I said, you have your alternative here, so you don't have to fight the customer on any of those things. Just keep that in mind. All your references are there. Click on any of those references, and you'll find everything that you need. So that's the one part I wanted to make sure. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move on to the next one, right? Organic foods. Are they more nutritious than healthy foods? I'm sorry, are they more nutritious than conventional foods, right? So what do we know about organic farming? A lot of people don't know that pesticides are still used in organic farming, and you can find those online on their list of allowable substances. And it's from their electronic code of federal regulation. So I just took a snapshot here, the National Organic Program, and you can see, you can click on all these little links, and it'll show you synthetic substances allowed for use in organic crop production, non-synthetic substances prohibited for use, synthetic substance allowed for livestock. So a lot of people think organic means no pesticides, and that is not the case. So is organic better? Let's take a look at what is the research. This is a systematic review, right? If whether or not organic is better for human food consumption than conventional foods. So this is a compilation of 35 studies. Very recently, most were observational, who directly measured health outcomes from organic consumption. And so a lot of the trials were short term, and what did it show? That organic foods were found to contain fewer pesticide residues. However, check out what the conclusion was. What the current evidence shows is basically we can't make a definitive statement on whether or not it's beneficial, and more research is needed. So to me, Neil, the takeaway here is, and we know there's a bunch of studies that show that they're nutritionally equal, right? They're not more, they're rich in vitamins and minerals. So what's the takeaway here? If you like organic for whatever reason, yes, but to be afraid of eating fruits and vegetables, that you shouldn't be afraid, because if you actually look at the data, organic foods both have similar levels of pesticide residues. And of course, what does that mean? Well, you can wash your fruits and vegetables, right? Neither contains dosages that are toxic. So we've been talking about the acceptable daily intake level, right? So I wanted to show you how these levels are actually, how they come up with them. And so if you look at this top bar, right, that reflects the no observed adverse effect level. You may have heard us talk about this before in previous webinars. This is no toxic effects, right? Above that, you might find some adverse effects, but below that, nothing, no problems. So this is our actual exposures through the diet, right, is actually there. And the acceptable daily intake is set at 100 to 1,000 times below the no adverse effect level. So why do they do that? Why do all these agencies apply this safety factor? It's for the anomalies out there, right, Neil? In case someone out there had some kind of weird reaction, they apply this 100 to 1,000 fold safety factor, and they're like, all right, acceptable to consume this amount, and we know that we're probably going to take care of most outliers, right, by applying the safety factor.
Yeah, and there's no question that the government has made a lot of mistakes back in the old days, the 60s and 70s, allowing pesticides before they fully tested them, and there's been some issues. So no one's arguing that. But the ones that are approved right now, again, there's still some issues that are going on out there, are fine if we're talking about pesticides. But the ADI, I think, is what Cass was referring to, goes across the span of everything. Like we're talking about sweeteners and things like that. Doesn't have to worry about it. Those are a billion times higher, so that's not it. But on the other side of that, the other thing about organic foods that where the benefits come in is also they're more environmental friendly, because there are some rules about organic farming, runoff, and things there that are good. So if you can afford it, there's no reason you wouldn't do it if you can afford it. But I think the whole point to this thing doesn't mean that the nutrition is superior to conventional. It's like, in other words, the nutrients that you're getting into your body, I think, at the end of the day.
Exactly. So I mean, don't shy away from eating fresh fruits and vegetables because of pesticides, because the amount in it, you're going to get way more benefit than you are going to put yourself at risk, as you can see. Sure. But the acceptable daily intake levels, as Neil pointed out, that applies to the sweeteners that we just talked about as well. All those values we gave you has 100 to 1,000 fold safety factor. Okay, so next one, right? I thought this was super interesting. Crunches, is that the only way to get six-pack abs? So I had to dig around to see if I could find some research in this area, right? And the assumption here is that doing an exercise for a specific muscle group, well, that's going to force the body fat over the muscle to go away. Think about that for a second. Exercising a muscle group's gonna, that's the assumption. That's what people think, that they've got to get, they got to do crunches. So I actually found a randomized control trial, right? Testing exactly this in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning resource. There's 24 subjects. They had maintenance calories, so they weren't a deficit. The control group was no ab exercises. And then they had the other group do ab exercises 5 times a week, 7 exercises, 2 sets of each of all these things. I'm sure we've all done these, right? Does all look familiar to you guys? Okay, so for 5 times a week, for 6 weeks, what do you think happened? Well, here are the results taken directly from the study, right? As you can see, there were no significant difference in the control or the exercise group before versus after. And so what was the conclusion? Abdominal exercise did not result in changes in measures of abdominal fat, measured by DEXA, which is a very high quality way to measure body composition, waist circumference, and compared to the control group. Surprise, Neil?
No. So the message here is this, and of course, if you haven't, most of you know I came from the bodybuilding world. you know, and if you ever see my bodybuilding pictures, and yes, if you haven't, go Google it now and go look at those. You'll see I had incredible abs. I mean, I always won best abdominals in different competitions and so forth, you know, even at the highest levels. And of course, obviously you train your abdominals like any muscle, and that way it grows, gets a little size. So when you lose the body fat, you can see them, right? But by working your abdominals like this does not make the fat go away from there. Otherwise, if there was such a thing as spot reducing, people that chew gum would have skinny faces. Okay, always, you know. And by the way, when you walk, about the only thing that moves is your butt. So why is there any fat on your butt? That's where you're constantly moving. So again, we know there's no such thing as spot reducing. And I think that's the message here.
Yeah. So again, what does the evidence show? Essentially, that crunches aren't the way to.
Yeah. They're a way to build muscle there, though, and you need it for your core. It's all good. So don't shun them, but that's not. You can't spot reduce.
Yes, you can't spot reduce. Okay, so let's get to fasted cardio. I think we're almost to the end, so we can get your questions. I see a bunch of questions pouring in. So let's get to fasted cardio. Okay, so where does this one come from? Well, during fasted cardio, what do we know? We know that the body relies more on your fat stores, your adipose tissue, for energy. And so what that results in is a higher fat oxidation rate, which can be measured in a lab, AKA more fat burning. Okay, so there's more fat burning that occurs in fasted cardio, so people will assume that it's better. Well, the question then becomes, well, does higher fat burning during exercise result in greater fat or weight loss? That's the question. That's what you really want to know, right? And so this was an actual study, right? Once again, a trial. One of the first, I think the only kind so far to date that tested directly fasted versus fed in what typical gym members do, right? So they took 20 women over the course of 4 weeks, randomly assigned to them to group one, where they fasted for 12 hours. And then they exercised, they did cardio, and they took a shake afterward. And I put the shake nutritionals down here so you guys could see. Group two, they did the shake beforehand, right? And the exercise was 1 hour of steady state cardio. That's what typical gym members do 3 times per week with no other structured exercise. And so what happened? Well, they were in a 500 calorie deficit, and just wanted to add that in, that they were all in a deficit. They had a protein intake of 0.8, which is close, a little bit higher than the, gram per pound, a little bit lower, I should say, than the gram per pound. And then 25% to 35% body fat. So just to show you what they did, the fasted group, there's a little bit of an age difference, just so you know, 21.7, a little bit younger than the fed group. And that's the composition, their macros and their calorie intake, as opposed to the fed group, right? But still very similar. The only significant difference there was in the age, just a little bit older in the fed group. And so what happened? Both groups lost weight and fat, and there were no changes between the groups. And so what happens was you can have a higher fat burning rate during cardio, but what that translated to was a lower one throughout the day, and vice versa. So what's the takeaway here, Neil, right? To do what you like?
The takeaway is no one cares how many calories you burn in a workout. Okay, that just helps your total calorie burn. And no one cares if it's coming from fat or carbohydrate in the total calorie picture. We care about how many calories you're burning over the period we're measuring. If it's a day, it's a day. If it's a week, it's a week. You're burning more calories. If you're burning more calories than you consume, you're going to lose weight. It doesn't matter. The problem with doing exercise on an empty stomach, yeah, of course you're going to draw fat because you're not glycogen full. And that doesn't take any rocket scientists to figure that out. But it's not what you burnt then, is what's going to happen the rest of the day. I'd rather burn more total calories in that workout, draw from glycogen, draw from fat, and then that my post-workout is going to be better. Everything, I'm going to get a better workout. I'm going to work harder. It's like telling an athlete to get on the field and go through a 3-hour practice and don't eat. You'll burn more fat. I mean, there's just something wrong with that whole equation. So at the end of the day, don't worry about the fasting. I mean, I'm not saying not that if you feel like that's the way you want to do, that's all fine, but it is really the total caloric intake, how many calories you burn through the day and the next day and the next day, not how many you burn in the workout. And when it's coming from fat, doesn't matter, because it'll come from fat later if you're in a deficit. That's it.
Okay, cool. So do
Yeah.
it. If
We
you
better get
hate
into
fasted
questions.
cardio,
Yeah.
you don't have to do fasted cardio. If you love it, then do it, right?
Do it. Yeah.
But to your point, Neil, excess post-oxygen consumption, EPOC, you guys have heard that term, right? It's higher in the fed group, by the way.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
This is an
You
interesting
know what?
one.
I think we should probably get by this, Cat, and go to questions, because I hate to say it. As you can only imagine, I'm slammed right now. I'm back to back. I got another one here in just a little bit. I'd like to stay
Okay.
on for the questions. We can save this for another one, the rest of the stuff?
Let's just save it, but I'll give you the take home. No, there's nothing wrong with mixing carbs, protein, and fat for digestion. Your body can break down all of them, right? Unless you have some kind of digestive disorder. And then I have this study on the impact of ultra processed foods. We'll upload this so you guys can get the study and see it. But basically,
we'll do another one. We'll do another one, and we'll add some of this and talk to it. I got a bunch of other myths that I kind of collect that we can throw into this as well. It's always a fun thing. It's always a fun thing to do myths.
Yes. Okay, so there you have it. Myths were busted. Hopefully you got some key takeaways. Maybe you dig into the research yourself. We want you to know that the recording will be posted on our website early next week. We might even get it up today if we're super ambitious. The dotFIT cert is currently free. So if you haven't taken the dotFIT cert, which was updated just recently, it's free right now. So if you haven't taken it, get some CEUs, add some knowledge base around nutrition. And then Neil and I are doing, and Neil and Zane, who's his son, and he's a pro MMA fighter, they're doing Instagram lives, I think on Wednesdays. Neil and I are doing Instagram or Facebook lives, I believe Fridays, but we'll announce that. So follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't joined our dotFIT Champions page on Facebook, please do that. And thank you for joining us. I know a lot of you have to run, you got to run to your next thing. So thank you for being here. And for those of you who want to stick around, enter into the chat box any questions that you may have, and we will do our best to answer them. Okay, here we go. A bunch of questions in. This is like the funnest part almost, right, Neil? Because it's just so many.
Unfortunately, I'm getting hollered at, so let's see how fast we can answer these. Like Zane makes me answer questions like 10 seconds he gives me.
Okay, ready? Okay, so it comes from John. He says, one question I had is, if I miss taking the multi before bed, I usually take it before bed and right when I get up, I missed a night. Do I double dose the next interval or just let it go?
No, let it go.
Let it go. Okay, good.
Just make sure
what's the next one?
Don't miss the next one.
Yes. Could we get a PDF copy of the slides on our email? Yes, we will link to a download. Okay, we will include a link to our download. It'll already be up there.
We already have all our master classes are up there. We'll show you where.
Absolutely. Has there been research on stevia? Yes, hopefully you saw that. If not, then you'll grab some of those links that we had on the slides. What do you feel is the best way to wash your fruits and vegetables? Just thoroughly underwater there, and a scrubber if you're worried about it. A fruit and veggies scrubber if you're worried about it. Don't use soap.
Yeah.
Okay. If you are only eating in an 8-hour window, should you take your multi on an empty stomach or take both during your 8-hour window? From Keith.
Yeah, you would always want to take your multi with food. So wherever you're eating, do it then. And if you're going to take two, then take them both at that particular time. That's the only time you're eating.
Yep.
Good question.
And then a question on EPOC is higher in the fed state. Yes, actually look up the study. I believe I read that. I've been running a ton of studies, so I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive EPOC was higher in that study.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, so Judy's saying, to sum up, fad diets, they have no impact on people in controlled groups. It all comes down to caloric intake in terms of weight loss, right, Neil? In terms of weight loss, if you're in a calorie deficit.
In terms of weight loss, not necessarily long-term health, but in terms of weight loss, and then weight loss improves health all by itself, no matter how screwed up the diet was, surprisingly enough, right? So just keep that in mind. That doesn't mean it's going to be long-term. That's why I always tell people, I love like the Mediterranean diet. I love the 40-30-30 with the solid nutrition. That makes the most sense all the way around, rather than all the other kind of removing total food groups, right? You can't study these things over a long period of time. It's impossible to do that. So we're just lucky to get a year study in these things. But if you had to study over a long period of time, I don't like any of these fad diets.
Right. Okay, so last one comes from Casey. How do you communicate with those people who say the research can't be trusted due to the funding of the industry that may benefit the research showing one way or debunking the other? The conspiracy theorists. What do you say to that,
well,
Neil?
here's what you do. I have a simple answer for that one, Casey. I only publish things that are a peer review, as you know, in the Practitioner Dietary Supplement Reference Guide. You produce that, and whatever we're saying here, you ask the other person to produce an equal document showing that many references that support the conspiracy theory. You're going to win every time. Okay, at the end of the day. Yeah, so don't even, you don't have to worry about that one at all. But listen, I totally agree with you. There are industry funded studies, but those are the minority. That's the whole point, right? Those are the ones that might be doing a conspiracy theory or sparking a conspiracy theory, right?
Right.
So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Okay, Eileen saying you did not mention inflammation and how sugars may or may not increase that.
Well, again, let's do this one more time. And that is, if you are an active person and you're active and you are not overweight, sugar is not going to hurt you unless that's all you're eating. And of course it's going to hurt you, but you wouldn't be active and you wouldn't be overweight. Okay. But when you are overweight and you are inactive, sugar is going to cause all kinds of bad things. That's what's going to happen. Any kind of added sugar, not sugar from fruit or any of those things, but added sugars are going to do bad things to you if you are inactive and overweight. So keep that in mind. There's nothing good about added sugars at any point, as far as I'm concerned. Natural sugars I get regularly, but there's something, you wouldn't deprive yourself of sugars. I love having a whole bowl of ice cream. I love having, a big crazy dessert every once in a while. But I'm active and I'm in pretty decent shape. So it doesn't affect my blood inflammation or anything. And it's not going to affect anybody else's either. Yeah.
And I'm going to add to that. When you look at these studies and people in a calorie deficit, when they lose weight and they're eating sugar, their markers of inflammation improve. Weight loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So weight loss. Yeah. Now, you don't want to, added sugar is not going to be part of your diet when you're losing weight, but you don't have to deprive yourself 100% of it. That's the only point. Right. We're not advocating sugar. Make sure you understand that.
Okay, Eric Bray says hi. Hi, Eric. My friend is trying to gain muscle. Her BMR is 2,300. Wow, that's her BMR. She's trying to gain muscle. What she should be doing? Go ahead, Neil, real quick. BMR 2,300.
Plug into the Muscle Gains masterclass that I just did. I've done two. She might even be a vegan. I did that one there. At the end of the day, if her BMR, you're saying BMR, basal metabolic rate, must be a very large woman. You're talking about female here? I mean, that would be someone that's,
that's very high.
175, 100, more than that, almost 200 pounds. If his total calorie burn is 2,300, but the goal is you set it 500 calories above the maintenance. So whatever the maintenance is, you add 500 calories to put on muscle, okay? Yeah. And then, of course, she's eating 5 or 6 times a day with 1 gram per pound of lean body mass throughout the day, and a before and after protein shake.
Okay, another question. Is more frequent meals that are smaller promote more weight loss than larger, less frequent meals? Once again, going back to the studies, whether it's fasting, any type of diets, meal frequency, has very little impact on total weight loss with equal calorie deficits between diets. Okay, so there's that. Let me answer that. What about carb cycling? Can be useful, right, Neil?
Yeah, carb cycling is something that bodybuilders have done for years. You like a high carb day and a low carb day, and endurance athletes will actually do it, as they get ready for an event. So there's a lot to that. But I guess what's the goal? What is your goal? Cycling carbs. We always did, as bodybuilders, we always did 3 days low, 1 day high. So 3 days at very low carb, and then your 4th day it wasn't a cheat day. We just jumped up in the carbs, filled our glycogen stores, and then went 3 days low. And that would kind of accelerate our weight loss, and also gave us something to look forward to every 4 days. When you're keeping your calories. So it's not uncommon to do that.
Okay, so just a couple more. Does eating carbs before a workout in the morning shunt fat burning? So let me just answer this real quick. You're going to yes, you're going to lower your fat oxidation rate, but it doesn't trump fat loss at the end of the day if you're in calorie deficit. You saw by that study, you know, it's the same. It comes out the same if you're still in a calorie deficit. Okay, so
you probably won't work as hard without the carbs before you come in.
mm-hmm.
So you want to work harder in that 1 hour or whatever you're doing, so you'll burn more calories later in the day. Just don't eat more calories. Don't add those carbs to your total calorie day. Take them out of your dinner and put them before your workout. Bingo. Boom.
Yes. Okay, good. And then E is saying, I guess your results also mean that insulin has minimum or no effect on fat loss, as it's more about total calorie deficit. Once again, go back to that dotFIT study that I cited, and low carb versus high carb insulin had no impact, but when they were protein matched and they were in a calorie deficit. So that's not my opinion. That's just what the research is showing.
Yeah, I mean, insulin's a normal hormone that just functions to keep you alive. Right?
Yep.
You know, so it pushes amino acids into muscle. So without insulin, you can't get amino acids in the muscle, and it pushes carbohydrate into your muscle. And if you are in shape, right? If you are in shape, you know, then everything works perfectly. When you gain weight, insulin is now compromised. So insulin itself isn't, but insulin resistant, because your body can't figure out what to do. Do I burn fat? Do I burn carbs? Do I burn fat? Do I burn carbs? So when you are overweight, yes, we generally always bring your carb intake down when you are going there. That's why we have that, you know, the different types of diets we do. But, you know, insulin isn't what makes you fat. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, what's interesting is that dotFIT study, talking about research funding, Neil, one low carb group, advocacy group, actually did some funding to it. So it just goes to show you, just because, you know, a body funds a study doesn't mean that it skews the results one way or the other. Okay, Rainer wants to know, dotFIT Cert is not available for regular subscription on your site. It should be available. Email support@dotfit.com. We'll take care of you, okay?
Yeah, I don't know how that is. Yeah, we'll alert someone also on that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it, Neil. I know you got to go. We both have some other live events, so thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I appreciate you guys still being here. Check out our website for more. Stay safe. Stay physically distancing.
Have a great weekend, and thank you for taking care of your communities. We will be here for you throughout all of this.
Yes.
Thanks.
Bye, guys. See you next time.